Alright, this is IMAX Nation 1980 here, and I decided to return to my record collection again. This is my 100th video, by the way, and, I'm done with the classic rock section, so I'm going to move on with the progressive rock section. Also in this section are artists that have tried a multitude of genres. Alan Parsons Project, Ammonia Avenue, released in 1984. And Alan Parsons, of course, Alan Parsons was the engineer of the Beatles' Abbey Road and the engineer of Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe, all members of Yes. This album was released in 1989. Features epic cover artwork by Roger Dean. Asia, featuring band members from Yes, King Crimson, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And with Roger Dean cover artwork once again. This was released in 1982. This is their self-titled debut album. This is Alpha by Asia, their second album, released in 1983. David Bowie. Now, I wouldn't call him progressive rock necessarily, but he's tried so many different styles of music that you just can't categorize him into one genre, I think. You could correct me, because, this record collection, it isn't organized for good. I mean, I change it up quite a bit. And it's in the shrink wrap, and this is the David Bowie poster is included. This is Space Oddity, by the way. This was released in 1972. Space Oddity was a British David Bowie album released in 1969, and it was released here as Man of Words, Man of Music. And the poster does not come with it, unfortunately. David Bowie's David Live. David Bowie at the Tower, Philadelphia. It's a pretty long title. Electric Light Orchestra, Face the Music. This had some accessible hits on here like Evil Woman and Strange Magic. Electric Light Orchestra, Discovery, released in 1979, 4 years after Face the Music, and some might think that this is when ELO sold out. I mean, yes, Don't Bring Me Down is very disco-like, but still, it's just a pop song. It's enjoyable, but yes, they did kind of go a little more mainstream with that song. After that, ELO would do the Xanadu soundtrack. Emerson, Lake and Palmer's self-titled debut album from 1970. In pretty bad condition, unfortunately. Here we got Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Tarkus, released in 1971. Excellent condition. There's a little sticker on it. Got it at a record store for $7. Good deal. Here we got Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Pictures at an Exhibition. This was released in 1972. This is a live album. Go. And it's in good condition. Emerson, Lake and Palmer Trilogy, also released in 1972. And Brain Salad Surgery, another Emerson, Lake and Palmer album, released in 1973. Frank Zappa's Waka Jawaka. This was released in 1972. If you look at the faucets, they say Hot Rats. That was a Frank Zappa album from 1969. That one's a classic. 72. This is Frank Zappa's Overnight Sensation, which was, him going a little more mainstream, but it's still a very good album. Nice cover artwork, as always. Here we got Studio Tan. Studio Tan was one of 4 albums that Frank Zappa offered to Warner Brothers to, fulfill the contract, and Warner Brothers did not pay for them, which was in violation of the contract. Frank took the material to another record label and put together leather in an ambitious 4-album box set, and he tried to release it in Halloween 1977. Warner Brothers stopped him from doing that and put out the 4 individual albums instead, 3 of which had artwork not authorized by Frank Zappa, and this is one of them, and you can tell because the cover artwork is very tacky. This was released in 1978. This is Studio Tan. Not to mention they without the notes, any of the liner notes, they spelt some of the songs wrong, like Redunzel, and shortened the Adventures of Gregory Peccary to just Gregory Peccary, and Let Me Take You to the Beach became Let Me Take You to the Beach. Little differences like that. Frank Zappa's You Are What You Is. This is the British vinyl pressing on CBS Records. This was released in 1981, and it's a double album. A very good one at that. Hawkwind, the Xenon Codex, released in 1988. I have to get more of the serious Hawkwind albums. This one was released in 1988, but I gotta get the Hawkwind albums from like the early 70s. Space Ritual comes to mind. Okay, here we got the Book of Invasion, a Celtic Symphony by Horselips. This is a demonstration copy only, not for sale. Released in 1976. Jethro Tull, Stand Up. This one's a classic. If you open up the gatefold, it's like a pop-up book. 1969. Jethro Tull, Aqualung, another classic from 1971. Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick. This is probably one of the best album packages of all time. It opens up like a big newspaper. So many little details. Released in 1972. Jethro Tull's Living in the Past. This might be out of order, but I think this album was released in 73, I believe. I'll post the correction on annotations. Actually, it's from 1972, I just looked. Okay, War Child, another Jethro Tull album, released in 1974. MU, The Best of Jethro Tull. You can barely see the artwork. Basically a greatest hits collection, as always. This one was released around 1975. Here we got King Crimson's in the Court of the Crimson King. This is a milestone in progressive rock history. It is an excellent album. Check it out. Released in 1969. Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues, released in 1967. Another spectacular album. And the vinyl version is the way to go, because the remix is done for the subsequent pressings after 78, I believe, and the CD just can't compare. You can hear some things on the vinyl, the original vinyl, that you will not hear on the remixes. Here we got In Search of the Lost Child. Chords, sorry. This was the Moody Blues' second album. Actually, it's the third album. First one was The Magnificent Moodies, then Days of Future Past, then In Search of the Lost Chords. That one's from 68. The Moody Blues on the Threshold of a Dream, released in 1969. Another great album cover there. The Moody Blues, A Question of Balance, and I have 2 copies of this album. Another great cover, as always. Actually, it's one of those covers that you have to open like this in order to get the full artwork. Much like Frampton Comes Alive and other albums like that. And here's my carbon copy of it. Moody Blues, Seventh Sojourn, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Actually, the Moody Blues became a little bit more popular with this album because of, in the United States, with I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band. This was released in 72. There's another Moody Blues, Seventh Sojourn. Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon. What record collection would be complete without this? Classic. Pink Floyd's Animals, and I have quite a few copies of this one. Released in 77, Dark Side of the Moon, as you all know, was released in 73. And here's the other 2 copies of Animals. 2 copies that I really don't need. Procol Harum, A Salty Dog, in the shrink wrap too. Released in 1969, I believe. I'll correct that on annotations if it's wrong. Queen 2, released in 1974. Of course, Queen's second album. Queen, like David Bowie, is another band you can't really, put into one genre. They've tried so many different styles, and maybe they should just be their own genre. Just call it Queen music. It's like so unique. Got Queen, Sheer Heart Attack, also from 74. Queen, News of the World, 1977. The cover being a parody of the 1951 science fiction classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. 77. Queen, Jazz, 1978. Some of the shrink wrap is ripped off. It's a gatefold sleeve. The Queen soundtrack to Flash Gordon. Dino De Laurentiis' 1980 film. I have never seen the film, actually, but I want to. I'll probably like it. Rush, 2112, released in 1976. This is a classic right here. Supertramp, Breakfast in America. Now, this is a more mainstream album by Supertramp, but they are a progressive rock band, so why not? Released in 1979. Big song, a big album for Supertramp. The Yes album, released in 1971. It's actually Yes's 3rd album. You might think with a title like that would be the first, but it's actually the 3rd. The first being Yes, and then the second one being Time and a Word. I think that's the name of it. And another copy of the Yes album. Fragile, a Yes album from late 1971, I believe, and then released in early 72 in the States. Close to the Edge. Now, this one is from 72. Got this at a record store for only $6. Good deal. Worth it. The camera a little more. Yes Songs. The triple album live set. This is epic right here. Look at the size of this thing. You open up the gatefold, it's massive. And here's a much worse conditioned copy right here of Yes Songs. That was released in 73. Here we got Yes going for the one from 1977. Unfortunately, somebody cut the bottom section out of the album cover. Free Being Records, $1.99. It's from New York City. Wonder how it ended up in my state. Classic Yes. This is a 1981 compilation album. Of course, more epic Roger Dean artwork. Can't go wrong. Yes, 90125, released in 1983. They started going a little more mainstream with this album, but, And finally, Big Generator, which is supposed to be not a very good album, but, still have it for the sake of it being a Yes album. Released in 1987, 4 years after 90125. I'd also like to note that I got a new turntable recently from a friend, and you know that last summer I had a pretty bad setup. Like, I didn't have sound coming out of one of the speakers, so I replaced the old turntable, and it turned out the old turntable, there was something wrong with the wiring, something wrong with it. It was a Technics. It was very nice too, but this Sony servo-controlled turntable from 1993 it's very good for what it is, and this thing, and I've got the speakers, hooked up, and no more problems with the speakers. Got a pretty decent receiver there too, and it's good because I can listen to these albums again in full stereo. So that was my progressive rock collection. Thanks for watching. This was IMAX Nation 1980, signing off.